You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caporelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. So welcome back, strategy creators. We are in for another great episode as always, still carrying on with the big backlog of user submitted questions that we have. So we're going to go ahead and get to those over the next weeks and months. And I don't know if I have quite enough yet for years, which is why you have to go out to dearstrategy.net and ask a question, right? Or go to our sponsor company, which is also the company that I own, Strategy Generation Company, and take one of our workshops or bring us in to work with your company. And you will have the unique honor of partaking in an exercise where you can ask questions for this show. And you'll also learn a lot about strategy. So those are different ways that you can ask questions if you are interested. But let's go ahead and get to today's question, which really gets down into the weeds a little bit. But I like that because we've been at a high level for a few weeks now. So let's go ahead and get granular. This question is, Dear Strategy, how do you sort out the specific features of product requirements from tons of information that you gather from market insights based on the customer, industry, competitor, etc.? Now, the reason that I really wanted to answer this question this week is because last week, if you remember, and by the way, if you don't remember, go back and check out the episodes right there. But last week we talked about making sure that you have a good, solid base of information and data to build your plan from, so that adds credibility. And from that, companies should be willing to take a little more risk because they'll trust the plan more, right? So you have to gather a lot of information. So this question really kind of goes around, okay, I'm going to gather all that information. I have tons of data. How do I sort through it, right? And in this case, this person is asking about using it to create requirements, which is a little more granular than we normally talk about on the show, because when we're talking about baseline analysis and data and information gathering, we're usually talking about using that to create the bigger picture strategy, the high level strategic initiatives, and then from that, the lower level actions or tactics that you would take based on all the information that you have. But you can use the same exact process to create individual product ideas, product requirements, and product development projects, because you're drawing off the same base of information. In fact, most of the companies that I work with, they don't have a separate base of information that they're using for strategy versus for product development. It's actually all the same stuff. Product development, you're just going a little deeper, right? But you're using the same insights. In fact, it's imperative to use the same insights because you don't want them to be disconnected. So as you're gathering those information, that information, if you're doing it with respect to a specific project, right, which is what I think this question is around, how do you sort through it to decide what features you want to actually add into your product or not? And this question, by the way, would apply whether you're in a waterfall process or an agile process, because you still have to pick requirements, right? Even though agile is more iterative and you're picking more requirements over time and you're doing that on an iterative basis or an ongoing basis, you still have to choose, right? And waterfall is the same thing. You might be choosing more of them at one time, but you still have to choose which ones are important and which ones are not. So how do you do that with respect to all the information that you came up with? Well, there's actually a lot of different methodologies to this. Most people will use some type of a decision matrix, right? For those of you who are not familiar with that, is really just a simple chart that lists, whatever you're trying to decide on and whatever criteria goes along with that, so that you can prioritize things. So in this case, you would be listing all of your features or all the requirements, and you would have some type of criteria that you would use to evaluate those requirements with respect to one another. So maybe you're going to use, how big of a need it is. Okay. So what is the customer priority for that? Maybe you'll talk to how much it costs. Maybe you'll talk to how much time it takes to develop. Maybe you'll talk to or use one of the criteria of what kind of return you're going to get on it. And, some features are going to generate revenue and some will not. Are they nice to have? Are they need to have? Is it part of the functionality of the product? So there's a lot of different methodologies or lots of different criteria, I should say, that you could use to go ahead and evaluate these different features with one another. So when you put a decision matrix together, you basically just list all of those things, right? Put together a table and then assign a priority based on whatever criteria you're evaluating. And that will help you to prioritize which features go into the product and which ones don't. There are other methodologies as well. Sometimes people are just using more of an intuitive, decision. Sometimes people are basing their decision purely on what the customers want, right? So if the customer absolutely is demanded that they want X, Y, and Z, then that goes in, and then anything outside of that, not. If you're in the agile world, sometimes you're going to use some combination of what you can handle in a given sprint, right? Versus, what is absolutely required to make the product work. So you'll usually get some combination of bug fixes and features that people want or people that want to build into the product in any given sprint, which is typically 2-4 weeks and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. But the idea is to try and take all of this data that you've collected and sort it and organize it in some way. So a table, a decision matrix, that's usually the methodology that I would use. A couple of pointers though is make sure that if you are doing a decision matrix that you think about what kind of weighting you want to give to each one of your criteria points. So for example, if there's something that customers have asked for, and that's one of your criteria, then that might get a bigger weight than, let's say, a cost criteria, right? Just for an example. So, because you want to make sure that you give the customers what they want first, regardless of what it's going to cost your company. I don't know how many businesses actually operate that way. Probably more should, but you get the idea. Think about what the weighting should be. So that's an important thing on a decision matrix. The other thing that I would say is when you're prioritizing features, you're always going to get that bucket of features that are things you could build in, but maybe you don't need them. And so you don't know, right? So it's really important to differentiate your absolutely must-haves, right? Those are the things that you need to go to market with for whatever reason, versus the nice to haves or don't want to haves at all, right? So it's the nice to haves that become a little confusing. And if you don't differentiate between those things, then when you send it to development, everything is going to be a must have, right? And so that's something that you don't want to get into a situation of. So make sure that you're looking at what things you absolutely have to build in and what things are optional. So the things that are optional, you could use some prioritization and decide what you want to tackle now and what you might want to tackle at a future date. So that's kind of how you would do it. Now, one last comment that I'll make on this is, in order to sort this with the criteria in mind, make sure that when you are bringing the data into your company that you're organizing it in some way. So in the question, the person asked about customer, industry, and competitor, which is important, right? One that's missing in there is your company. So that's another one as well. But we always talk about the three big buckets. On this show, we talk about the company, we talk about the industry, which includes your competition, and we talk about the market, which includes your customers. So those are the three big buckets. So as you're collecting information and data that you want to sort out later, make sure you put them in those buckets so that they're easier to insert into your decision matrix when you actually get to that point. So that's basically what I would say. Again, how do you sort out the specific features of product requirements from tons of information that you gather from market insights? Again, use some type of a decision matrix, decide what criteria you want to use to evaluate the different features. Make sure that you know what weighting you want to give to the criteria. Make sure you separate the must-haves from the nice-to-haves. And when you do all of that, you should be able to put together a reasonable plan and sort through all that information to make something really, really great from it. So if you have a question that you want to be featured on the show, go visit us at dearstrategy.net or dearstrategy.com. They both go to the same place. And you can click on the Ask a Question link, and that will take you into a contact form that you could use to give us feedback or ask a question for the show. You could also go out to strategygeneration.com. My company also sponsors the show, and we offer workshops. We offer a whole series of workshops. So bring us in to work with your company. And one of the exercises we do is giving you an opportunity to submit questions for the show. So just a fun little thing that we do, but that's another way that we gather information. So go ahead and take advantage of that. And if you haven't already, please go out to Facebook and join our Facebook group. We are Strategy Creators. So just go ahead and find that link, ask to join, and we'll be glad to welcome you as part of that community where you can get advice on strategy, share your strategic stories, all kinds of great things. So while you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. And we'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.